the body of a female had been located in the grounds of Ley Green Farm. We could see that she had a clear wound to her neck. It was a bloodletting scene. There are no eyewitnesses. There is no CCTV. There's no doors that we can knock on. This is going to be a real whodunit.
There was a fear that there might be this crazed killer on the loose.
The husband has found the body of his wife. Have they had a row that he's actually ended up killing her? We know that she had been married on 4 previous occasions.
She'd obviously had quite an acrimonious split.
Was it a robbery that had gone wrong? Or it could be some random person. You've got a killer who is picking on people with a knife and killing them in broad daylight.
In Hampshire, on the southeastern edge of the New Forest, lies the small village of Bewley.
When people think of Bewley, they think of what a beautiful old village it is, quiet and peaceful. It's quite a bright and cheery place. It's lovely.
Bewley's very unique. We're surrounded by parkland, and we've also got the river that comes into the middle of Bewley village.
Cyclists and hikers are always around, and people do come to Bewley just to walk around the town. It's so beautiful.
It's in the New Forest National Park, so we have animals, donkeys, horses, cows, and in autumn, pigs roaming the village.
And they are one of the attractions of the visitors. They like to be photographed standing next to one of the donkeys. When I was growing up in Bewley, it was a sleepy village. It wasn't until the 1950s that Lord Montagu opened a motor museum, and of course that started attracting a lot of people.
The houses with the red doors belong to the Montagu estate, and all the other coloured ones are privately owned. A lot of people have lived here a long while.
I've lived in the village of Bewley for 30 years. Yeah, we all look out for each other.
It's idyllic. It's a beautiful, beautiful spot where not much happens. As a local reporter, normally if I'm doing anything about Bewley, it's about speeding motorists and animal welfare.
I've never come out here at all in my 30-year career to investigate any type of crime, and in particular murder. So around about 6 p.m, I was at home, and I remember my phone ringing, and I knew if I'm getting a call out of hours, something bad has happened. And sure enough, a body of a female had been located in the grounds of Ley Green Farm under suspicious circumstances.
She was found by her husband just after 4 o'clock in the afternoon.
He had arrived at the scene here to meet his wife, who had been tending to her horses, just in this field over here.
He got to the field and he'd seen her lying down with her top sort of half up, and he thought she was sunbathing. And he'd actually walked towards her and gone, "Come on, you can't be sunbathing all day."
But as he approached her and got closer, he could see that she was lifeless, and in fact there was blood coming from around her neck.
He suddenly realised what he was actually seeing. The shock from something so, get up, stop sunbathing, to suddenly realising your wife has been attacked must have been horrendous for him.
He immediately called the emergency services. Local police ascertained that this was an unexplained death.
The body is that of 47-year-old Pennie Davis.
We established quickly, from speaking to the husband, that the victim lived locally in Blackfield, which is just down the road.
When I spoke to Pennie's family, it was extremely emotional. I mean, at the end of the day, I'm a stranger. So it can't be easy to lay yourself bare and for me to ask, you know, questions about what your mum, what your wife was like. From speaking to her family, Pennie Davis was a very loving, hard-working woman who seemed to be very loyal to her family, very supportive to her husband, her new husband. Pennie's children spoke admirably of their mother. She was there for everything, it sounds like. A lady who liked to get hands-on with her family, and one of her daughters said if she could be half the mother her mum was to her own kids, then she would be very happy. Pennie Davis was a woman who just liked life. She seemed to be in a happy place and enjoyed her horses.
Pennie had a job in the local Sainsbury's. She was a mother of 5, and there was nothing unusual about Pennie at all at that point. We've got control of the crime scene. You know, we have closed it down, that we have a cordon in place. So when the pathologists initially attended the scene, they did a visual examination of Pennie. Pennie had a clear wound to her neck. Pennie's horses were still roaming around the field. And what the pathologist shared with us was that actually they have had experience whereby a horse has reared up, causing a similar injury to the neck with the sharpness of their hooves. However, I was keeping an open mind that, you know, we need to treat this as an unexplained death until we've had the post-mortem results. So having assessed the scene, we're not afforded with lots of forensic evidence. There is no CCTV.
There were no apparent witnesses to the actual incident itself. With that, it was challenging to establish what had happened.
I remember actually saying to the guys, you know, this is going to be a real head-scratcher, you know, this is a real whodunit. And then close to Pennie's body, very close to Pennie's body, was a car key and a £1 coin next to a pool of blood. So that was significant. And so the obvious question is, well, whose car key is that? And I was told that it was a Skoda car key. Well, what car does Pennie drive? I was told it was a Toyota Land Cruiser, but actually we had the husband who had turned up at the scene, and he actually turned up in a Skoda. She'd only been married 3 months, so initially I'm already thinking this could be quite suspicious. You know, the husband has found the body of his wife in a very sort of secluded area. Have they had a row and that he's actually ended up killing her? And now he's making excuses as to how he's found the body. And I couldn't rule her husband out as potentially being a suspect.
When the post-mortem report is returned, it confirms Pennie's death is not accidental.
What the pathologists had found was that Pennie had in fact been stabbed multiple times.
Pennie Davis was ferociously attacked. She was stabbed 13 times. She received 6 stab wounds to her chest and torso area. All of those could have been fatal blows.
It was clear we are dealing with a murder investigation.
Although at this stage details are scarce, rumours of the suspicious death quickly spread around the village.
The police kept their cards very close to their chest. I mean, there were rumours hanging around, but no definite news at all.
I think there was a level of fear among people that there might be this crazed killer on the loose.
We hadn't encountered any crime of this magnitude ever in my lifetime. And of course, when one hears that there has been a murder in our village, one tends to wonder whether the murderer could still be around us, either living in our community or in the fields, woods around. So this was of considerable concern to us.
Nobody knew what had happened. Why should it happen in such a place like this? It's, you know, it's not heard of normally around here.
By now, the village are talking that there's a lot of police activity at Ley Green Farm. You know, they would have heard whispers that a body of a female may have been found. And now we have to confirm that this is in fact a murder investigation. and there may be a killer in their village.
In the picturesque village of Bewley, detectives are investigating the murder of Mum of 5, Pennie Davis.
Was it a robbery that had gone wrong? Well, actually, when we look back at Pennie's car that was parked just at Ley Green Farm there, the handbag was visibly on show, so no one had gone for her car to take her handbag, so we could confidently rule out robbery. So we really wanted to know why this had happened, and more importantly, who had done this.
When it first happened, obviously Hampshire Police were sort of trying to find any witnesses. Of course, this is such a remote area, there's no CCTV. All they had to go on, really, was a car key and a pound coin.
One of the lines of inquiry is what's called a victimology, and that is really going through the victim's past with a fine-tooth comb to see if there's any little secrets within their life that perhaps close family members may not even know about. Anything that might help us understand why someone will want that person dead. And this is going right back through Pennie's history to find out if she's had any particular run-ins with anyone. Has she been threatened in the shop, for example? When we were speaking to Pennie's family, you know, we try and elicit who would want to do this to your mother, you know, who would want to do this to your wife. And the family just couldn't come up with anyone that had had a beef with Pennie that would want her dead.
But the family do disclose a seemingly innocent piece of information.
Pennie had moved her horses from their previous paddock in Romsey to Ley Green Farm.
Pennie had only been using Ley Green Farm for the last 5 days. She'd moved her horses and because she'd had a falling out with the owners of that stable. So it could be that, you know, the previous stable owners may be involved in this.
If this was a targeted attack, then the killer knew where to find Pennie.
We know that Pennie had been married on 4 previous occasions. Are they still in touch? Is there a reason why they might want her dead? We found out, having looked at Pennie's past, that she had a previous partner who she was together 7 years with. They split up. It was quite acrimonious. They all lived together as a family unit. He had his own children, and obviously Pennie had her children. And we know that things weren't always happy within that household.
And Paul must consider one further terrifying scenario.
It could be some random person. If that's the case, that really ramps up the ante, because you've got potentially a killer in the village who is just randomly picking on people with a knife and killing them in broad daylight.
As detectives follow multiple lines of inquiry, house-to-house visits continue.
We established that the local river warden, Tony Norris, was out and about in the area at the particular time.
Tony is someone who's very much works within the community, knows what's going on, is very much got an eye for what is in the right place and what isn't.
And we felt sure that if Tony had seen something, you know, that was going to be crucial.
The river warden's job is to ensure that there are no poachers. So I have to walk up and down the banks probably once a day just to check everything is okay. On the Tuesday afternoon, I left home about 2:45 and was driving past Ley Green Farm, and I noticed a silver hatchback car parked by the bridge. Now, 9 times out of 10, I would have turned round and gone to investigate, but for some unaccountable reason, on this occasion, I didn't. And this was, of course, about the time of the murder itself. I came back about 6:30 with the idea of doing some fishing on the river, and I noticed that this silver hatchback car was still parked there. I became very suspicious at this point because an unoccupied car wouldn't be parked there for such a long period of time unless the person was up to no good. Or possibly, of course, it could have been a car which had broken down. and the driver had gone to seek assistance.
Suspicious as to why the vehicle is there, Tony takes a closer look.
I was actually looking to see if there was any fishing gear there. There's no reason for anyone to park on Hertford Bridge unless they were possibly going fishing. And since, of course, it's completely private, I concluded that there's a fair chance that the driver of that car could be poaching. I've got a very poor memory, so I took a photograph of the car showing the registration number, and I could use that in the event of me discovering that it was actually a poacher. I left it at that, and I got my fishing gear out, crossed the road, and set up all my gear. And a few minutes after I started fishing, a garage pickup truck arrived, and my suspicions were allayed that it was nothing out of the ordinary. I wasn't very successful with my fishing, so I packed up and went home, and thought nothing more of the evening's proceedings. The police requested that we had a meeting. We sat down in my upper drawing room, and we discussed what I'd seen. I did mention that I had taken a photograph of a car, and it was that they were very interested in. And they said, "I'm going to have to seize your camera."
I was interested because, you know, we had a vehicle that was close to the scene of where Pennie's body had been found. So we checked the registration number. It comes back to a local female. She is known to the police, but it's very low-level, sort of antisocial behaviour type stuff. The chances are the vehicle has broken down and it's been recovered. So I asked officers to go and speak to the owner of that vehicle.
And it was established that she had lent the car to a local male called Justin Robertson.
So we checked with our police national computer. And Justin Robertson was on our system as a low-level thief. Convictions for robbery, I believe, burglary, little minor drug dealing and that kind of stuff, but certainly nothing of violence that would suggest that he would potentially be responsible for Pennie's death.
When officers locate the vehicle, it appears it has been recently cleaned.
And so you're starting to become a little bit suspicious. But obviously we want to speak to Justin Robertson. You know, why was he in the area at that particular time? Why had the car been recovered? He may well be a witness. He may have seen somebody suspicious coming out of that field. But obviously, on the other hand, he could well be involved in the murder. Justin Robertson was a bit of a nomad. You know, he was a bit of a sofa surfer. And so we were desperately trying to locate him, but to all intents and purposes, he had vanished.
As detectives try to locate the elusive Robertson, Paul is back in the major incident room when he overhears a discussion about the Skoda key found right next to Pennie's body.
It was a hive of activity like it is in any murder incident room. And then you could hear that there was a conversation going on just outside of my office between the crime scene manager and a colleague of his. And one of them said, "What car was it that the husband drove?" And somebody shouted out, "Skoda." And then the next thing they said, "Well, but this is a Vauxhall key."
And of course, his ears pricked up because he knew that that was the make of the car that Tony Norris had taken a photo of on the bridge over the river that very day that Pennie's body was found.
And as soon as I heard that, you know, I was straight out of the office and saying, "What did you just say?" And they said, "The key at the scene is a Vauxhall key. It's not a Skoda key." And obviously, I'm then thinking about the Zafira that Tony Norris has seen, and then all of a sudden, you know, that is the key to the investigation. The first thing I asked myself is, well, who told me it was a Skoda key? How did we get to that? I guess the symbols are fairly similar from a Skoda to a Vauxhall. It's an easy mistake to make. But I was kicking myself because one of the first things you're taught is ABC, which is accept nothing, believe no one, and challenge everything. And unfortunately, I didn't do that when I first went to the crime scene. I accepted that it was a Skoda key, and we put 2 and 2 together and came up with 5. And it wasn't until I was told that it was a Vauxhall key at the crime scene that I realised how significant Tony's discovery was.
I think at this point, I think the police really thought they had something to hook onto.
So now, having established that the key next to Pennie belonged to the Vauxhall Zafira, that explained why it was being towed away, because the key had been lost. I can only assume that the murderer was driving that Vauxhall Zafira and dropped the key during the attack. And so Justin Robertson, being the driver of that vehicle, he moved from a person of interest to a suspect in a murder investigation. The priority was to get hold of Robertson as quickly as possible and bring him into custody. This is somebody who we believe is dangerous, who may be armed, and who may kill again.
In the New Forest village of Bewley, detectives investigating the murder of Pennie Davis have a suspect, Justin Robertson. The key to a car he was driving was found next to Pennie's body, but things aren't adding up.
There was no link between Justin Robertson and Pennie Davis. So by now there's all sorts of scenarios being played out in my mind as to what has happened here. Has Robertson dropped the key innocently, walking through the field, and then Pennie had been murdered afterwards? Robertson didn't really have any previous convictions to suggest that he was capable of this type of violence. And there was no connection between him and Pennie, so why would he do this? The priority was to get hold of Robertson as quickly as possible. And so officers were looking at all of his associates, you know, could he be sofa surfing? We were getting warrants, we had firearms teams going through various addresses looking for Robertson, and eventually we came out with a phone number that we could attribute to Justin Robertson.
I think it was police looking through the mobile phone records of Justin Robertson that they realised that he'd made a number of calls to the same number.
Leading up to Pennie's murder, probably for about 2 weeks, there was a lot of conversation going on with a particular number. And then as soon as Pennie's body had been discovered, all communication on that number had stopped. And so for me, that was really, really interesting. We found that the phone was registered to a lad called Ben Carr. We wanted to know whether there was any link between Ben Carr and Pennie Davis. I remember then speaking to the family, do you know these 2 individuals? One is Justin Robertson, and they looked at me blankly and said, we've never heard of Justin Robertson. And I said, and what about Ben Carr? And then they went, Ben Carr? He was our previous stepbrother. Mum used to be married to his dad. And then, you know, suddenly you're thinking, hang on a minute, we've got a link at last. There is a link between Ben Carr and Pennie Davis and Justin Robertson.
Pennie had quite an acrimonious split from the father of Ben Carr. Benjamin Carr was Pennie's stepson. It doesn't sound like they had the best of relationships from the off, really, which obviously got more and more strained.
We established that Pennie had made an allegation against Ben of sexual assault against some young girls in the past. That was investigated and didn't go anywhere, but it clearly caused a rift between Pennie and Ben Carr and his family.
Pennie and Ben's relationship got to a point, due to allegations made by Pennie against him, that he had to leave the house.
He was being ostracised by the family. It was getting a very, very tense atmosphere within that family unit, and so that was a potential motive.
But Pennie's family are not convinced.
Animosity between Ben Carr and Pennie was years ago. You know, this had all kind of fizzled out as far as the family were concerned. They'd all moved on. Ben was no longer a part of their life. They hadn't seen or heard from him for a number of years. And so we wanted to know, why would Ben Carr want Pennie dead?
The pieces of the jigsaw are not falling into place for detectives, and so they dive deeper into Pennie's history.
As is usual in any homicide investigation, we do searches of the family home. We seize diaries, laptops and phones belonging to the victim that might give us more information to see who's contacted, the victim. Has there been any falling out with anyone? And lo and behold, what we came across was a conversation between Pennie and a female that had taken place on Facebook Messenger. This conversation had taken place at around about 2 o'clock in the morning, and I can only describe it almost as a drunken rant on Pennie's behalf. She had reached out to a female who was due to be marrying Ben Carr's father. And in effect, what she had said was that, do you know what you're getting yourself into? Ben Carr has committed sexual assault in the past. I'm going to get him arrested for this. I'm going to ruin your wedding day.
Pennie was threatening to go back to the police and sort of renew those allegations against Ben Carr.
So now, having examined this rant from Pennie, we could show that there were a lot of things at risk now.
The motive for Ben Carr was to silence Pennie Davis once and for all, so that she couldn't rekindle the allegations that she'd previously made.
And when police look at the timing of the online messages Pennie sent, alongside the phone calls between Carr and Robertson, there is a clear correlation.
There was a build-up, a contact from the time that Pennie had sent this rant on Facebook. We saw the conversation started to pick up between Robertson and Ben Carr, and then the day that Pennie is found dead, all that conversation stops. And so it has to be linked. And for me, it's showing a clear conspiracy between these two parties.
It is now 3 days since the murder of Pennie Davis.
Day one, we had just a body in a field and very limited information to work with. By day 3, we now had 2 named suspects. We had Justin Robertson and we had Ben Carr, and I had officers out there actively looking for both parties.
Within hours, Ben Carr is arrested on suspicion of Pennie's murder.
He didn't kick off, he didn't protest his innocence, he just came in cool and calm, and to my surprise, he went no comment. If you're not involved in this horrific crime, then surely you're going to tell the officers you're not involved. But what he actually did do was provide a prepared statement. It was words to the effect of, I didn't kill Pennie Davis, I do know who she is, and I was at the gym that day, and that was it.
Needing to confirm Ben's alibi, police attend the gym where he claims to have been working out at the time of Pennie's murder.
And sure enough, officers find that he'd swiped into the gym with his membership card, but not only that, we'd found him on CCTV. Now, the challenge for us was that the CCTV actually put him in the gym at the material time when Pennie was being killed. And we knew that even if he had a helicopter, he couldn't get from the gym to Bewley and back again.
Ben Carr was interviewed over several days, and there was insufficient evidence at that stage because of the explanation that he had provided to charge him with an offence.
I had to release Ben Carr on bail. But obviously we've got Robertson still out and about, and what I couldn't have was Ben Carr speaking to Robertson and telling him what information's already been disclosed to him, because that might help him build a defence. And so, I really needed to ramp up the operation to try and get Justin Robertson in.
Hampshire Police launched a huge manhunt to find Justin Robertson.
We had armed officers going around, various associates that may be allowing Robertson to lay low at their address.
The police knew that he had links to a drug dealing network throughout Southampton. They knew people who maybe would be sheltering him. They knew that someone would have information that would finally give Justin Robertson up.
We had information to suggest he was down at Hythe Marina on a boat, and just as we went onto the boat, he had then moved on from there. And so he was just one step ahead of us.
Despite a massive manhunt, Justin Robertson, the man believed to be instrumental in the murder of Pennie Davis, is eluding police. And then the investigation takes an unexpected turn.
I got a phone call, and it was from a solicitor who said that they were representing Justin Robertson and he will be giving himself up that evening.
Well, the police, I don't think they could have possibly imagined that after a couple of days, Justin Robertson would have actually have handed himself into the police station in Southampton. I think that was quite shocking.
Justin Robertson is questioned under caution.
I thought he would probably make the officers work for it, but to my surprise, he began talking straight away.
That day, she lent me the car. I drove it out to Bewley, parked it on that bridge.
He admitted that he had borrowed the Vauxhall Zafira. He admitted that he had parked it up on the bridge.
There's like a house, I think, round here, big house, loads of sheds. Obviously I was having a mooch. Mooch in the daytime to go and have a look for things, and then at night time you go and rob it.
And what he was saying was that I was in the area because I was looking for houses to burgle.
Somewhere between this bridge here and this place out here, there was, I thought I'd lost the key. At no point did I see that lady. There was five horses in that field. After I've gone back to the car. Yeah. Obviously I found out I didn't have the key then.
He was trying to be clever, you know, he thought that he could give a reasonable account as to why he was in the area. When you watch him in the interview, he's very chatty, almost cocky.
Some people describe me as a rogue. Some people describe me as a nobody will ever describe me as a murderer.
Robertson made it really easy for us because he had put himself in that car. He could have said it had been stolen, but he was confident enough to say, I was in the area, but I didn't kill anyone. What we then disclosed to him during the interview was actually we have got the key, and it's been found inches away from Pennie Davis, who'd been stabbed multiple times. So what have you got to say about that? He then went no comment, because I think he realised that actually, you know, the game was up. He'd run out of lies, and he was charged with Pennie's murder.
And then detectives uncover a crucial piece of evidence.
We're looking at Pennie's last movements. We've got CCTV of her leaving her workplace, getting into her vehicle, and then driving to Ley Green Farm. And what we noticed, not on the day of the murder actually, but the day before, we could see the wheels of Pennie's vehicle. But what we also noticed, that effectively in convoy with Pennie's vehicle were the wheels of a Vauxhall Zafira. So we would say that Pennie was being followed by Justin Robertson the day before and potentially was due to die that day.
This raises the question as to why the murder was not carried out the previous day.
We now know that Pennie was actually with her daughter at that particular time, and therefore we think the operation was aborted as a result of a witness being present.
It's a chilling thought, and in the minds of detectives, it indicates Robertson's premeditation to cause harm to Pennie Davis.
Let's say Justin Robertson was in the area at the time and he was going to commit a burglary, and he got spooked by Pennie and decided to attack her because he didn't want to get caught for a burglary. This now shows that actually, no, this was a targeted attack. Pennie was being followed to a location that only a few people knew that she would be going to, and therefore it had to be somebody who knew Pennie quite well to say that she works in this location and she keeps horses at this location.
And Paul believes that person is already known to police.
Ben Carter certainly would have been privy to the information of where Pennie worked, And so by now it's starting to show that this was a conspiracy and Ben Carr has put Justin Robertson up to it. And so because Ben Carr was on bail, I decided that we would rearrest him, and he was charged with conspiracy to murder Pennie Davis.
2 people had been charged with Pennie's murder, and obviously we popped that straight on air to let people know that this person had been caught.
As the trial commences, Paul and his team have concerns about the body of evidence they are about to present.
What we don't have is forensic evidence linking Robertson or Carr to Pennie's murder. And don't forget, it was quite a bit of blood at that scene. Those jury members are expecting forensic evidence.
It's always a tricky situation when you don't have the forensic evidence in a case.
But things start well for the prosecution.
We get a stroke of luck because, to my surprise, what Ben Carr said was, I do know Justin Robertson, I do know Pennie Davis. He said, I'd had a falling out with Pennie, she was threatening to disrupt my life, so he agreed to pay Justin Robertson £1,500 to go and find her and warn her off.
He indicated that he had hired Justin Robertson, but not to kill Pennie Davis, but to scare her.
And Carr knew what buttons to press to persuade Robertson to do this for him.
Ben Carr stated to Justin Robertson that Pennie Davis had abused him when she was in a relationship with his father, but there was no substance in relation to those allegations.
Justin Robertson has this hatred for sex offenders, and that was the ignition that Robertson needed to go off and lose his temper with Pennie Davis.
Carr goes on to explain how the man he paid to put the frighteners on his former stepmother ended up killing her.
He says Robertson was wearing a balaclava and that the balaclava was then removed by Pennie during a struggle. Robertson then lost it and stabbed her multiple times. But, you know, that certainly wasn't part of the plan. You know, Robertson is the one who's taken it too far. That is nothing to do with me.
It is then Justin Robertson's turn to take to the stand.
He was cocky, he was looking up at the public gallery and winking, you know, and the family are there with Pennie. It's the most distasteful thing I've ever seen in a courtroom.
Justin Robertson's behaviour was described by the judge as offensive and a misguided attempt at bravado.
Robertson tries to refute Ben Carr's version of events.
Justin Robertson said that Ben Carr was lying in order to drop him in it and to blame him solely for the murder and to get himself off the hook.
So Justin Robertson's defence was that he'd gone to the field to case the area for burglaries and that he knew nothing about Pennie's death, and all of a sudden 2 supposed conspirators had ended up being absolute foes and they were just throwing mud at each other during the court case.
The prosecution then bring out a witness whose evidence will wipe the smile from Justin Robertson's face.
We had a witness that would testify that Justin Robertson visited her on the evening of Pennie's murder.
He said to her that he'd killed somebody. He went into her kitchen and pulled out a knife, indicating that that was the similar sized knife to the one that he had used to stab Pennie Davis multiple times.
And actually the measurements were similar, that the pathologist could show it was a knife of that kind of size. Really caused him some issues. So he had nowhere to go to say he didn't stab her, because a witness said that he'd confessed to doing exactly that.
With the evidence laid out in court, it is time for the jury to retire to consider their verdict.
And I start reflecting then on kind of how the trial's gone. Robertson had given evidence. He wasn't a credible witness at all. He was cocky, he tied himself up in knots. But Ben Carr was quite well spoken, He was respectful towards the judge and the jury. He was well polished. You know, were the jury going to fall for that?
But the jury see beyond Carr's slick exterior.
The jury deliberated for 16 hours and returned verdicts of guilty in respect to both. Carr was found guilty of conspiracy to murder and received a sentence of life imprisonment with a minimum tariff of 30 years. Justin Robertson was found guilty of murdering Pennie Davis and received life imprisonment with a minimum tariff of 32 years.
I remember Robertson, I think, just shaking his head but smiling, and I think Ben Carr just dropped his head and started weeping. But my eyes were then drawn straight up to the public gallery where I could see Pennie's family, who were extremely relieved and very emotional, to say the least.
It all comes down to money at the end of the day. Justin Robertson would do anything for a quick buck, and Ben Carr had said that he'd quite happily pay him £1,500 to murder Pennie.
But there is one final twist in this case.
When we searched Ben Carr's house, we actually found a roll of money that added up to £1,500. And when we examined that money, it turned out to be counterfeit. And so it just goes to show what these people are like, the lowest of the low as far as I'm concerned.
So this is the echo of the April the 22nd, 2015. I was then able to read what Inspector Barton said here. It wasn't until we heard about the car on the bridge from Mr. Norris that alarm bells started ringing. He had the sense to take a picture of it. To have a photo was perfect. It pleased me that I was actually able to make some contribution in the successful solving of what is a pretty ghastly crime.
There was a real sense of pride for me and my team having had this result. But what was particularly sad for me was that ultimately we had a husband that lost his wife, we had parents that had lost their daughter, and we had children that had lost their mother.
And they carried themselves, their family, so honourably throughout that whole trial.
It is not them, but us, Pennie's family, who have been given a real-life sentence. The life of someone precious to us, a mother, daughter, wife and sister, has gone, and she can't be replaced.
Pennie's husband was very emotional afterwards. You know, he loved her so much, and he was broken by this. He found his soulmate, and then she was cruelly taken away from him. And like he says, he will never get over this.
Despite a massive manhunt, Justin Robertson, the man believed to be instrumental in the murder of Pennie Davis, is eluding police. And then the investigation takes an unexpected turn.
I got a phone call, and it was from a solicitor who said that they were representing Justin Robertson, and he will be giving himself up that evening.
Well, the police, I don't think they could have possibly imagined that after a couple of days, Justin Robertson would have actually handed himself into the police station in Southampton. I think that was quite shocking.
Justin Robertson is questioned under caution.
I thought he would probably make the officers work for it, but to my surprise, he began talking straight away.
That day, she lent me the car. I drove it out to Bewley, parked it on that bridge.
He admitted that he had borrowed the Vauxhall Zafira. He admitted that he had parked it up on the bridge.
There's like a house, I think, round here. Big house, loads of sheds. Obviously, I was having a mooch. Mooch in the daytime to go and have a look for things, and then at night time you go and rob it.
And what he was saying was that I was in the area because I was looking for houses to burgle.
Somewhere between this bridge here and this place out here, there was, I thought I'd lost the key. At no point did I see that lady. There was four horses, 5 horses in that field. After I've gone back to the car. Yeah. Obviously I found out I didn't have the key then.
He was trying to be clever, you know, he thought that he could give a reasonable account as to why he was in the area. When you watch him in the interview, he's very chatty, almost cocky.
Some people describe me as a rogue. Some people describe me as a
was going to commit a burglary, and he got spooked by Pennie and decided to attack her because he didn't want to get caught for a burglary. This now shows that actually, no, this was a targeted attack. Pennie was being followed to a location that only a few people knew that she would be going to, and therefore it had to be somebody who knew Pennie quite well to say that she works in this location and she keeps horses at this location.
And Paul believes that person is already known to police.
Ben Carter certainly would have been privy to the information of where Pennie worked. And so by now it's starting to show that this was a conspiracy and Ben Carr has put Justin Robertson up to it. And so because Ben Carr was on bail, I decided that we would rearrest him, and he was charged with conspiracy to murder Pennie Davis.
2 people had been charged with Pennie's murder, and obviously we popped that straight on air to let people know that this person had been caught.
As the trial commences, Paul and his team have concerns about the body of evidence they are about to present.
What we don't have is forensic evidence linking Robertson or Carr to Pennie's murder. And don't forget, it was quite a bit of blood at that scene. Those jury members are expecting forensic evidence.
It's always a tricky situation when you don't have the forensic evidence in a case.
But things start well for the prosecution.
we get a stroke of luck because, to my surprise, what Ben Carr said was, I do know Justin Robertson, I do know Pennie Davis. He said, I'd had a falling out with Pennie, she was threatening to disrupt my life, so he agreed to pay Justin Robertson £1,500 to go and find her and warn her off.
He indicated that he had hired Justin Robertson, but not to kill Pennie Davis, but to scare her.
And Carr knew what buttons to press to persuade Robertson to do this for him.
Ben Carr stated to Justin Robertson that Pennie Davis had abused him when she was in a relationship with his father, but there was no substance in relation to those allegations.
Justin Robertson has this hatred for sex offenders, and that was the ignition that Robertson needed to go off and lose his temper with Pennie Davis.
Carr goes on to explain how the man he paid to put the frighteners on his former stepmother ended up killing her.
He says Robertson was wearing a balaclava and that the balaclava was then removed by Pennie during a struggle. Robertson then lost it and stabbed her multiple times. But, you know, that certainly wasn't part of the plan. You know, Robertson is the one who's taken it too far. That is nothing to do with me.
It is then Justin Robertson's turn to take to the stand.
He was cocky, he was looking up at the public gallery and winking, you know, and the family are there with Pennie. It's the most distasteful thing I've ever seen in a courtroom.
Justin Robertson's behaviour was described by the judge as offensive and a misguided attempt at bravado.
Robertson tries to refute Ben Carr's version of events.
Justin Robertson said that Ben Carr was lying in order to drop him in it and to blame him solely for the murder and to get himself off the hook.
So Justin Robertson's defence was that he'd gone to the field to case the area for burglaries and that he knew nothing about Pennie's death, and all of a sudden two supposed conspirators had ended up being absolute foes and they were just throwing mud at each other during the court case.
The prosecution then bring out a witness whose evidence will wipe the smile from Justin Robertson's face.
We had a witness that